Hello there guys, and welcome to the next video. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the top 5 monsters in D&D. Of course this is an opinionated topic, and I think these monsters fit pretty well into any medieval RPG that you may be running. They're quite standard monsters, or they're quite they're quite commonplace, but these are monsters that I think the DM and the players will get the most fun out of. Their monsters with some unique mechanics. They're monsters that if you have not had a chance to play, I recommend you do so. But they're also monsters, with the exception of I think about one, that have some pretty low CR ratings, meaning you can introduce these really early on in your campaign and have them be some really fun and interesting encounters. So we're just going to jump straight into this right now, with the first monster being the Shadow. Now, the Shadow is exactly that. It is a shadow that creeps along the floor. It is highly stealthy, it is highly manipulative, it's quite fast as well. But what makes the Shadow really terrifying is the ability that you see here, its strength drain, that allows for basically the character's strength score to be reduced. Now, even if you are running a high level adventure with some high level characters, shadows in great numbers can be absolutely devastating. They can reduce your berserkers, your barbarians' strength score right down, making their attacks a lot more feeble against your final boss. They are a really useful monster to use, and they can also, in the correct circumstances, absolutely obliterate a party. I was running a game before that had and used the Greater Shadow, and the Greater Shadow was very similar to the regular Shadow, apart from it had a +7 to hit, and they had the ability to drain the strength by 1d6 instead, and they had the ability to teleport along with their fast movement of, I think it's about 40 feet. They also have the ability to teleport. So that was the Greater Shadow. Not something found in any D&D supplements. It's found in a sort of like a third-party product, which I would highly recommend, and I'll talk about in a later video. But the Shadows and their strength drain, as a challenge rating 1/4 creature, these are absolutely ludicrous. Really difficult to deal with, really dangerous, and a lot of fun to play. Coming up at number 2, we have the Intellect of Power. The Intellect of Power, what makes this creature, I mean, apart from reducing a target's intelligence, these are pets of illithids. I mean, they actually look quite cute if you ignore the fact that they have brains as bodies. What makes these creatures a lot of fun to play is that you'll often play them alongside a Mind Flayer, which is already a great villain for a campaign or an adventure. But these creatures can be absolutely devastating in their own right, because as I said, a fighter with a low intelligence score is probably going to be downed by one of these creatures and not have a chance to fight against that illithid. So, coupled with its body thief ability, which is going to allow it to contest intelligence with a possibly sleeping creature, or even worse, a creature that it has already reduced the intelligence of, it will basically be able to take over that creature's body. So can you imagine your 15th level barbarian having its intelligence reduced, and then having that intelligence score contested and taken over by an Intellect of Power while they rest? This is incredibly dangerous and can result in a TPK and some really interesting roleplay encounters. It's definitely one that I recommend throwing at your group and introducing them to early on, so that they know the dangers of these kinds of creatures. They are a lot of fun, and coupled in an encounter with some Mind Flayers can make them absolutely ridiculous. And number 3, this is our highest CR creature that we have on this list. This is the Remoras. oh my word, the Remoras I used on a whim in one adventure, and it is absolutely insane. It is a CR, I believe, 11 monster. It has the heated body ability, which means that any melee attacks against it are going to deal the attacker 10 points of fire damage. In addition to that, its regular bite attack can deal 50 points of damage to a target and grapple them in the same turn, which is an insane amount. What makes this creature absolutely fantastic is its burrow ability, which means that creatures without tremor sense, so player characters don't usually have tremor sense, won't know that this creature is about to burst from the ground underneath them, possibly gaining advantage on its attack, dealing 50 points of damage and grappling a creature in its first round. And if the group aren't able to get that player character out, it is going to then swallow them, dealing another 50 points of damage to that creature, and then possibly burrowing back into the ground with that creature trapped inside its stomach. It is a brilliant way, a terrifying way of removing NPC characters or player characters from an adventure. I tell you what, if you want to remove a character from a game, this is a way of doing it. I don't usually recommend that kind of thing, but it can make for some really, really memorable moments when the party's cleric, as they were heading in the frozen wasteland to the final fight of a campaign, was just eaten up by a Remoras, and they never find the body because the Remoras has tunneled back down into a network of tunnels. So what a terrifying creature, a lot of fun to play. Highly, highly recommend this one. Really, really great. Next up we have the Black Pudding. Now this was a pretty difficult choice for me to make, simply because I could have, instead of putting the Black Pudding, I could have put literally any ooze creature in there. I chose the Black Pudding because it is a challenge rating 4 creature, and I think I was kind of leaning towards a little bit of higher CR ratings at this point. The Black Pudding is unique, not unique, sorry, but it's interesting in that it has the ability to split into more Black Puddings, and as it starts with 87 hit points, you can guarantee that this Black Pudding is going to split into quite a few before the fight is over. What makes the Black Pudding absolutely horrendous is this idea of it using its spider climb ability to climb onto the ceiling where the party can't see it, and then dropping in between the plates of the paladin's plate mail armor. Now that is horrendous, and because of its amorphous ability, you can definitely work it into the story that this Black Pudding just begins to seep inside the plate metal, dealing 4 points of acid damage to this creature per turn, destroying its armor, destroying its equipment, meaning whatever the next fight is going to be, whatever creature has now had a combat with the Black Pudding, is going to be a lot weaker. This is going to be a fantastic, fantastic way of making your boss fights more memorable and more difficult without actually making your boss more difficult. If the party has done a lot of side quests during the course of a campaign, and they have, they've gotten some fantastic equipment, and you know that that final boss fight is going to be easily won, throwing a Black Pudding just before the boss fight is going to be a really good way of balancing those odds again. So the Black Pudding comes in at number 4. Finally, but definitely not least, we have the Ghost. Now I was racking my brains for a number 5 to this list, simply because there are so many fantastic creatures that I think you should put into a campaign and should use, but the Ghost is a challenge rating 4 creature, and it is fantastic for one reason. Not only is it able to age your player characters, which is a terrifying thought in itself, it is able to run away from them, it is able to deal damage to them just by moving through them, but it can possess them. Think of that difficult, high armor class fighter that you've got in your party, and now make them roll a charisma saving throw. Your wizard, who has spent years and years locked away in a library learning spells with a low charisma, I mean, they are going to suffer greatly when it comes to a ghost. And a ghost isn't going to leave the body unless it is forced out or the PC drops to 0 hit points, meaning that depending on your DM, a ghost can quite simply snap the neck of the person it is possessing, dropping them to 0 hit points and move on to the next target. It's a terrifying, terrifying thought, and there's a reason why encounters that involve ghosts are still so worrying. Aging players and also possessing them and forcing them to do horrendous, terrifying things is fantastic. Throwing yourself off a cliff, for example, because you were possessed by a ghost is one way of ruining a PC's day, but it is a fantastic emotive encounter that you can put in, and as long as your players are aware of the dangers of the ghost early on, they shouldn't be surprised. This is a fantastic monster. I highly recommend using it. Okay, guys, that is all I have for today. Just a quick short little video about my sort of top 5 picks that I recommend for your D&D games. If you haven't used any of these monsters on this list, I highly recommend you throwing them at your current party, your current group. If you have, then it's pretty likely that you guys have some recommendations of your own. Feel free to comment some of the monsters that you think I've missed, some of the monsters that you think new DMs should definitely pick out of the monster manual and take a look at. Thanks for watching, guys.